Hello and welcome. This is NTA Tuesday Live and I'm Cyril Stover. Now, African leaders unanimously endorsed President Muhammadu Buhari to champion the continent's fight against corruption at the just concluded 29th Ordinary Session of the Assembly of the African Union in Ethiopia. The recognition, many believe, might not be unconnected with the Buhari administration's commitment and success in the fight against corruption in Nigeria. Now, the African Union estimates that more than $50 billion is lost annually to corruption and other financial crimes across the continent. More worrisome is the increasing rate of corruption in spite of institutional frameworks in place to check the menace. And this is a trend developers say will change as President Muhammadu Buhari leads the continent's fight against corruption. Now, would this recognition scale up Nigeria's Transparency and Accountability Index? What is the role of Nigerians and Africans in winning the fight against corruption? These are some of the issues we'll be considering tonight on NTA Tuesday Live. But first, let's get to see this report by Makut Simon Macham.
Many theories abound as to why Africa remains underdeveloped in spite of its acknowledgement as the most endowed and unexploited continent in the world. While some identify the lack of capacity to harvest Africa's natural and human resources as a problem, others simply put the blame on poor governance, insecurity and lack of peace, as well as lack of capacity in the area of science, technology and low level of education. As the blame game continues, it appears that many seem to be united on the theory that posits that corruption is the major bane of development in Africa as it affects any positive attempt to make living meaningful for the millions of people on the continent. The statistics speak for themselves. According to the United Nations Economic Commission for Africa, between $50 and $148 billion is stolen from Africa annually. Another report by the Thabo Mbeki High-Level Panel on Illicit Financial Flows commissioned by African Union heads of state and government reported that about $60 billion was stolen from Africa between 2001 and 2010. When one brings the picture home to Nigeria, the story creates further explanation on how much damage corruption has done to the country. A Chatham House report, for instance, estimates that at least $480 billion was stolen by corrupt officials in Nigeria between 1960 and 2004. Little wonder there is widespread anger over the mind-boggling figures of monies said to be recovered from some public officials under the fight against corruption by the Buhari administration. Indeed, the president had during the campaign vowed to fight corruption to a standstill, as he believes that if Nigeria does not kill corruption, corruption will kill it. The fight against corruption in Nigeria has been relentless and led to the recovery of billions of naira and ongoing prosecution of suspected looters of public treasury who at different times are said to have carted away monies meant for development purposes. Now the efforts of the Buhari administration has not gone unnoticed, both at home and abroad, despite resistance by beneficiaries of corruption who are bent on discrediting the fight. The African Union, at its 29th Ordinary Session in Addis Ababa, Ethiopia, unanimously endorsed Nigeria and President Muhammadu Buhari to champion the theme for the next summit of the organization, which is winning the fight against corruption, a sustainable path to Africa's transformation. So what does this endorsement mean to Nigeria and the fight against corruption? Has Africa woken up to the reality of tackling this monster which has stalled development over the years? What changes can we expect soon? These are some of the questions our guests will be providing answers to on Tuesday Live. I am Makut Simon Macham, reporting.
And that report sets the tone for tonight's discussion. I'll go ahead to introduce our guest to you. We'd like to welcome to this program Senator Shehu Sani, who's Chairman, Senate Committee on Local and Foreign Loans, and Deputy Chairman, Senate Committee on Foreign Affairs. Senator, thanks for being here.
Thank you for having me.
We also like to welcome to this program Jeffrey Oyama, Minister of Foreign Affairs. Minister, thanks for being here.
Thank you very much.
We're joined tonight by Alhaji Isa Ozi Salami, former Nigeria representative on the African Union Advisory Board on Corruption, and also a former board member of the ICPC. Thanks for being here tonight.
Thank you very much.
Let me also welcome Dr. Musa Laufe, who is of the University of Abuja, excuse me, is Chief Imam Ansaruddin Mosque in Wuse. Thanks for being here.
Thank you very much.
Right. We're also joined tonight by Ibrahim Garba Wala, he's a lawyer and national convener, Citizen Action to Take Nigeria Back. That's a civil society organization. Thanks for being here tonight.
Thank you, sir.
Right. As we always do every Tuesday, we acquaint you with the procedure on this program. At the appropriate time, you can get to be part of the discussion in the studio. The various platforms will be on your screen. We advise you to take advantage of them. However, for those who will be calling in, we say this every Tuesday. When your call gets through, do us a favor, turn down the volume of your TV set. Just reduce the volume. That's the way to avoid a hurlback or an echo. Just turn down the volume. And the best way to know your call has been passed through is you'll see your name appear on screen. Once you see your name on screen, it means your call is through to the studio. Just go right ahead with a question or comment. Don't bother about the greetings. Just go straight on and keep it short so others can get on the platform. So once again, welcome to NTA Tuesday Live. Let's begin from the very top. Well, the news broke out that President Buhari had been endorsed to champion the fight against corruption on the continent of Africa. Senator, how did you feel about that? What was your immediate thought?
Thank you once again. Well, the very fact that President Muhammadu Buhari has been endorsed to champion the cause of anti-corruption in the continent, first of all, it is a honor to the president. It is also a honor to the country. It is also an appreciation of the effort of his government in terms of uprooting the evils of corruption in this country. It's also an intervention by the African Union to inspire other African leaders to follow the line of President Muhammadu Buhari, taking cognizance of the destructive pattern of corruption within the continent, how it has been able to undermine the continent's socio-economic and even political stability and order. And the very fact that President Muhammadu Buhari is now seen to be the emblem, the figurehead, and the avant-garde of anti-corruption in the continent, it's something of honor to us, and we should appreciate that.
All right. Minister, what's the input of this?
Well, I think it's a message to Africa as a whole, because obviously, you know, as I've always said, President Buhari is probably the strongest brand that Nigeria has, and recognized across the continent. So the fact of choosing him to be the champion, anti-corruption champion, I think it's a clear message by African heads of state in the framework of the African Union to the people of Africa that we are really serious about engaging with this, you know, very important and very sensitive topic for Africa. So, so I think it's good. I mean, if you think about it, if somebody else had been asked to be the champion for this theme, it wouldn't probably have had the same impact, the same credibility, and the same resonance across the continent. So, so I think it's really good for Africa. And of course, as the distinguished senator has said, it's also a clear recognition of the qualities of President Buhari, and I think also an acknowledgement of the impact that the anti-corruption program that he has for this country has been, because you know you also have to walk the talk, and it's very easy to have a program or for leaders to talk about anti-corruption, but I think that the difference here is that you have a leader who is actually walking the talk and living the talk. And I think in this context, something that I always find very interesting as to how little publicity is given to it is the fact that he's probably the only African president that, on assumption of office, has actually taken a pay cut, you know. And I think very often he's not given sufficient credit for that, which in itself, you know, is a message that it's not about money. Thank you.
Okay, that would be a new one to so many people. But let's come to Alhaji Sir Uzi Salami and start with your opening comments. And we have provided a champion, the fight against corruption. What does that say? What does it make you feel?
Well, I feel very vindicated because I was privileged to be at the ordinary session of the African Union Advisory Board on Corruption, where this initiative was commenced. And when I came back, I was elated, and I even announced that there was the move or the resolution of the stakeholders of Africa, including civil liberty organizations like the Pan-African Lawyers Union and so many other civil society organizations across Africa. We met in Arusha, and that is in October 2015. And we decided that if the fight against corruption must be properly positioned and purposely fought with all the energy that it requires, then there's need for a champion. And fortunately, everybody there at that time saw that General Buhari had campaigned using anti-corruption, which is a very unpopular, difficult theme to campaign with, and won an election on that basis. And then when he started, some of the moves that he had taken impressed everybody there. And the first thing that happened was that the Pan-African Lawyers Union actually brought their conference to Nigeria, and the theme of that conference was combating corruption, the role of the legal profession in Africa, just because of the coming to power of General Buhari and the circumstances and the emphasis that he placed on corruption. So it is the process that we started in that African Union Advisory Board that now went to the Council of Ministers and then to the Council of Heads of State, and we're happy that they have endorsed it finally. And I think it's logical and it is purposeful.
All right. So let's hear you, Dr. Musa Olaofe.
Well, if you look at President Muhammad Buhari in his inaugural speech when he assumed office, he said on that day, I belong to everybody, and at the same time, I belong to nobody. From there, you know that he's ready to fight corruption. And when he came on board, he knew quite all right, somebody who worked for Nigeria during 2011 when election was about to start, that this country, the way it's going, somebody must come to wake us up from this a very deep sleep. And as God will have it, he came on board, and he has started doing a very good work. Not because anybody that wants to fight corruption must not be a corrupt person. And that is why we can be able to see it clearly that award or no award, God has given him that award for fighting corruption in Nigeria, and is ready that if that is the only thing he will do for this country, he's ready to do it, and he's doing it. And that's why you see that everybody, religiously, economic-wise, politically, everybody is being very careful, because good name is better than anything. That once you are corrupt, and you can see that that corruption is taking a very low level in Nigeria. That everybody is running away because you don't want your name to be named, and you don't want anybody to harass you. And then even when he came on board, even without even talking, those who believe that I have money with me, it's better for me to go and declare myself before many things happening. So we can see that this award is a welcome one for the whole Nigeria and the world at large, because he deserves it.
Okay, thank you very much. Many issues you've raised here. And before we go to them, we still have Reverend Garba who will give us his perspective on this.
Thank you very much. I may want to start by correction and impression. Probably I look like one of the lawyers you know. My brother, particularly Mr. Boala from the Northeast. I'm from the Northeast as well. But I'm not a lawyer. I'm one of the members of the civil society organizations. Just to correct that. Yes, they've spoken very well. I think if I'm going to add is to the younger minds like we, the president has been our source of inspiration. And I can tell you, most of the civil society organizations, you can hear our voices all over the country, not because of anything, but because the body language of Mr. President has given us that hope and that opportunity to help come out and take this fight. It's yours. That is what he always said. And we believe that is it. And with this development, I can assure you that, yes, it is quite motivating, quite inspiring. We have a lot of energy in us. We want not just Nigeria, the continent. Because even when he started, we were feeling so bad because the other neighboring countries, it's just like in the issue of insecurity. You might protect your own territory, but trust me, we still have to relate to each other in terms of trade, in terms of exchange of our policies and security and all that. So if you don't extend it beyond your territory, trust me, you'll be fighting half away what you're supposed to be doing. Now with this endorsement, it shows that, yes, we are working towards having the united Africa that we have always dreamt of. And as such, we are not only celebrating, but we're putting our hands together to ensure that all other civil society organizations will sit up. Let us extend our voices across the continent so that when there's peace in Nigeria, there's peace in Africa. Because it is a common saying that once a businessman succeeds in America, he succeeds in the world. Same here. If a businessman or any initiative that actually flourish within Nigeria, it is as good as flourishing across Africa. So President Buhari, in the fight against corruption, it is a success to Africa. And we are ready to take it more than that. Thank you.
All right. Expectedly, with President Buhari being the figure out there to drive this fight against corruption in the African continent, it does mean that that's Nigeria taking a leading role. But the question here, I think, would be, how will this role be performed? Seeing the very many faces of corruption, and let's even take Nigeria as an example here. It's way, way tough to prosecute this war against corruption, even in Nigeria. Now we're looking beyond Nigerian territory. How will this work out?
Well, first of all, when a continental body like the African Union decided on itself to appoint an anti-corruption czar for the continent, it is a recognition of the fact that it is a continental problem. And it is also an acceptance of the reality that it is impossible to stamp out corruption in one country when other countries are deeply involved in it. By the very fact that we now have President Muhammadu Buhari as a continental anti-corruption czar, now the battle will be on a continental level, and each and every government and each and every state within the membership of the African Union will take that as a policy, as a course, as a program, and also a national priority. There are different type of governments within the continent. Some are democratic, some semi-democratic, and some are outrightly dictatorial. But what is a common feature to the continent is the very fact that corruption undermines the socio-economic and political progress of the continent. With a figurehead or a brand, as been said by the Honorable Minister, in the person of President Muhammad Buhari, a clear message is sent to all the leaders of the continent that this is a time for cleanup. And also a clear message is sent to the international community that this continent is at this historic epoch moment of human history, determined to wipe out corruption from the continent. If we can go back a bit to see what had happened in the last 50 years, because most of the countries within this continent got their political independence in the 60s, early 60s or late 50s. We have seen the evolution of different kind of governments and the failures and the inability of the continent itself to catch up with the rest of the world. You can't compare the progress, economic, political, and social with this continent and what is happening in Asia and Latin America. And it has been observed clearly that corruption is a major factor that impedes our progress as a people, as a black people in the continent, also as a part of the global community. So now, having someone to speak for those who are against corruption and to also provide the guiding light for the cause of anti-corruption is a grace to the continent that this is the compass to which will show the direction to which the continent should follow.
All right. Well, Minister, what instruments do you think can be deployed here? I mean, you're talking about Africa where you still, like the Senator just said, you have some governments that are democratic, some are not nearly as democratic as the others, and you find certain countries in the continent whose leaders are not in any hurry to imbibe democratic ideals or even leave office. So what instruments are you going to deploy in this, being in the forefront, showing the light, what to do?
Well, I think, it's a process. It's not something you can, deal with overnight. I think in many African countries, corruption is endemic. So the position in which our president finds himself, what can he do? Essentially, I think the first thing is going to be communication and messaging. You have to get that message across, and of course, when you have a respected figure putting that message out there, that's already something. Now, the fact that, as the distinguished senator has said, it's a continental body that is taking that step, I think it also tells us something about where Africa is today. And it's basically that, and I saw this myself over the last year and a half at the African Union, I get very much the sense that you're having a critical mass of African leaders who are really stepping up to the challenge of real leadership and good governance. Why do I say this? I say this because first and foremost, they've all come together and decided that we needed to reform the African Union itself, and have taken some concrete measures to that end. And they are becoming much more engaged personally in the transformation of Africa. I think a significant number of them really now believe, that, as we put it in our slogan, that change begins with each and every single one of them as leaders. And so the fact that they've all come together and selected our president to spearhead this initiative shows that they too are prepared to buy into that message, to support his championship or championing for the period that it will last, and do what they have to do within their countries. So I think, you know, the message is very important. In terms of you know, other concrete action, you know, I think clearly we could look perhaps to strengthening certain legislative instruments, you know, within the continent, treaty instruments, and having that domesticated at the national level, you know. But I think that, you know, it really has to flow, first of all, from the message, the buying into the message, and then the what one might, you know, call institution building, putting in, you know, strengthening the institutions on the continent to, you know, to really support that whole process.
Well, all right, that might be one of the biggest challenges so far, the institutions, strengthening them. And you do have a situation where you have numerous agencies that have been deployed in the fight against corruption, to check corruption. And it's quite possible that us in Nigeria, these ad hoc agencies are duplicated in other African countries too. So we're looking here at going through a maze of agencies, institutions, and a lot of people might wonder, couldn't this lead to a little bit of dissipating of energy, which otherwise could have been concentrated in the Nigerian situation? What do you think about that? Is it possible?
Yes, you know, I mean, you have a point. At the end of the day, you know, it's not even so much about the physical, you know, institutions themselves, the structures. It's really, you know, a bit more than that. A lot of it is education. A lot of it is, you know, the economic circumstances, the way the economy is working in a number of countries. You know, so it's important to have those institutions, but I believe that it's more than that. It's more than just the institutions. But I don't think there's anything also inherently wrong in having, you know, different institutions engaged in the whole process. I don't think it's duplication as such.
All right, Alaji Saudi Salami.
You see, the issue of corruption being endemic in Africa cannot be overstressed, and the need to combat it is of utmost importance if Africans and African people must have comfort of life. And it is felt that if you have a champion of anti-corruption, he will spearhead the efforts of the various countries and try to coordinate so that we can really strike success at the end of the day. And as the Honourable Minister said, combating corruption is not an event, it is a process, and it takes a long time, because to change human perception is very, very important. Say in Nigeria here, despite all that, the example that the president himself has shown in the fight against corruption, it is very, very embarrassing that when a convicted person for corruption, we have all been talking that conviction takes a very long time, the judiciary and what have you, but where finally a conviction is secured, when the person comes out, the kind of ovation that welcomes him is very, very difficult to understand. Because in one breath, we all say corruption is bad, we all believe it is bad, and we all know the negative impact it has in our progress as a people. Yet, when we say corrupt person, we want to embrace him. So this contradiction is not only in Nigeria, perhaps it's in other parts of Africa. And I think there is need for us to address this issue. And I'm happy that the minister spoke about education and enlightenment. Public enlightenment is very, very important. Of course, catching those who are corrupt and imprisoning them, enforcement is also very important. But most importantly is if we can plant it in the people that corruption is bad and it is not welcomed, I think it is going to have a lot of impact on even those who want to go into corruption.
Okay. Well, the lines are already open and we have our first caller tonight, Peter, who's calling in from Abuja here. Hello, Peter, go ahead.
Good evening, sir.
Good evening.
Yeah, I'm listening to the program. As much as I appreciate the contribution of the panelists, particularly the civil senator and the citizen action. That's all right. I want us to understand that Nigeria is in the forefront of African affairs. For the corruption to be successful, we have to make sure that it achieves a reasonable success in Nigeria for other African brothers to compete. So we have to tidy up that of Nigeria, first of all, before we start extending beyond the borders. Let's tidy up that of Nigeria first, because an adult staff. The president is facing a lot of challenges. So we don't fight more than we can chew. Let's sort out Nigerian problems first, so that other African countries will.
Oh, yeah. All right, Peter. Yeah, we got that last bit. I think the important thing you were trying to put out is that we should sort out issues first before we begin to think of exporting the ideology to other parts of Africa. But this all has to do, to a large extent, with the change in attitudinal change. And when Nigeria is in the forefront, we could as well use the same slogan, which the minister has just alluded to. The change begins with me. If we're extending this to the continent, so let the change begin with Nigeria. I guess that was what Peter was trying to say. What do you say about that?
Well, we can see that he has spoken very well, and we can see that that change begins with me, with us, is already in place. If you look at it very well, and Nigeria as a country, Nigeria is really trying its possible best to make sure that every one of us will shun what we call corruption. And that is what is giving everybody joy, that those who are corrupt, what do? Because they don't have integrity. And they don't think anybody can happen to them. And that is why they're always involved in that. But when we see somebody who is in forefront, that is ready, and it doesn't fear anybody, then it will reduce drastically. And if all of us can support such people, for example, people cannot eat fine, people cannot move freely, and those who are corrupt, they go about everywhere, enjoying themselves. And Nigerians are crying. And you know, when this issue of corruption begins, and Mr. President says he's ready to fight corruption to the last, you know, and you can see that Nigerians are happy. Because in the olden days, the issue of corruption, Nigerians are not corrupt. Even when you leave your money somewhere, you can still come back and take that money. Now, human beings now, they carry them away, and they must get money before they return them back. Now, where are we going to? If you go to, even outside the country now, this fighting of corruption has given us a very good name, that Nigerians are really trying. President Buhari is really trying. Others are really trying. Then that changes begins with me, is working. It is everywhere. Then when we continue like this, it will be reduced drastically, and everybody will enjoy it. So by the time we have zero base on corruption, everybody will enjoy. The issue of, the president has really tried, let's be realistic. The issue of TSA is part of it. That let the account, every account, let it be under single one umbrella. Let us see where the money will be going up and down. Then you see people crying that we don't see money again. What type of money? Is your salary not complete? Or you want additional money? Then during December, whereby people says, yes, we need to pack the remaining money and make sure we settle ourselves, they return money back to the treasury. Why some people are not happy? Then why can you return money to the treasury, whereby we are still here? But have you forgotten that not everybody works? Some people they don't have the opportunity to be a civil servant. They're a businessman and they don't see money. You are working, you are seeing money, and then you are still complaining. So if somebody is there that if you take 1 naira that doesn't belong to you, you are going to jail. Then Nigeria doesn't like jails because we like freedom. So for anybody to go and put us in jail, we need to be very careful. And that is why you see the whole thing is going down drastically. So charity begins at home. We have started this. It is when we started, like that man that asked question, that they should look for where Nigeria should start first. We have started. And it is when that's example seen in Nigeria that is everywhere. That's the reason why we are giving that award. That award is not for President Buhari alone. It's for the whole Nigeria that we are not corrupt.
Okay, back to the phones. We have calling in from Benue, Thomas. Thomas from Benue. Hello.
Hello?
Yes.
Hello?
Good evening, Thomas. Go ahead.
Good evening. Hello?
Yes, go ahead, Thomas.
Yeah, good evening, Sir.
Yes, good evening. Go ahead.
My contribution is that I'm very happy. I'm very happy that our president is recognized and the African Union. I am happy that it's recognized by African Union and it should keep it up. The corruption. And fighting corruption for Nigerians, we make Nigerians to live happily. Stealing of money should stop. Nobody should steal money. Government money should not be stealing. So I am happy today that our President Buhari is recognized, and it's a welcome development in this country. We thank God for that. God should bring in home peaceful. God should heal in and let him come and continue the work for us in Jesus' mighty name. Thank you.
Right. Thank you, Thomas from Benue. Well, what's the kind of message that Nigeria should adopt here in leading the anti-corruption fight on the African continent?
Well, I think when I was listening to individual coming up with an instrument to be deployed, particularly narrowing down to reorientation of Nigerians through the campaign slogan known as change begins with me, I felt they were talking to me as a person, because we're here celebrating one person, the president. But the question is, what about me as a person? What about the minister? What about the senator and the dignitaries here? This is not about an individual. It is a collective thing. It is a collective effort that will reflect to the continent. Now, we have lots of crises within. Quite okay. The administration has set the tone. Everything is going on. The consciousness is there. People are pricking their conscience to, you want to leap, you look at it very well, because who is watching you? But the issue here is, we have the leaders, particularly the political class, and those, the custodians of the law, the judiciary. If not for the image of Mr. President as a person, we cannot sit down here and be talking about the success recorded. I'm sorry to say, respectfully. Why am I talking like this? As a member of the civil society organizations, we know how many times, how many issues we do bring up, but you find politicians having a way of controlling some of the the instruments, because they have the power. because they are disposed, I mean, they have some instrument disposed to them, which they can use. Now, take, for example, we have a lot of crises within the legislature and the judiciary, including the executive. But come, are we going to continue like this as a country? Because one person who is our president has a very good pedigree, has a character strength that is actually motivating another generation. And yet we have this generation that are used to business as usual. What am I talking about? From election process, the lack of party, I mean democracy within the political parties, these are also corruption. We have individuals that don't respect the laws because they have resources. We have the governors at the states. Can this image collectively portray a good image for Nigeria? No.
Right.
So we should not just be talking. We should really put this in practice. Whoever that is guilty, it should be, that person should be charged. We have top officers leaving the dock and going back to office to sit, and yet have control over the institutions. How?
All right, we have another caller from Jos this time. Lawal from Jos. Lawal, go ahead.
Good day, everybody.
Right.
My contribution here is all the politicians please should be, always know that we are the one who we are the one who made them there, and they have gone there to serve for Nigerians, for us. So my contribution is President Muhammad Buhari and the good people know that there are corruption around him and so on and so forth. So if somebody, or if Muhammad Buhari know that you are corrupt, he should do something about you, or he should move or send you far away from him, in order to Nigeria make good leadership or leaders. So we need leaders that will listen, and so this is.
All right, Lawal, thank you for calling in. And yes, Senator, there are those who would say, can this really go beyond symbolism, mere symbolism?
Well, first of all, it is important and also imperative that we should recognize our role as a country, the role we can play continentally. I've heard someone who said that we should concentrate on what is happening within our borders. Mm-hmm. But I want him to understand that Nigeria is not Malawi, is not Burkina Faso. We historically have a role to play in the sub-region and to play in the continent, and we are also a global role player. The appointment of President Muhammad Buhari will not simply end with an appointment. There must be a process that will justify that appointment, which include setting up template for anti-corruption within the continent and also bringing out continentally conformist principles to which countries will accent to. And also, it is a clear instrument that somebody is in charge continentally, that this is someone who can be held responsible and has a duty to perform. If you look at, before having someone as anti-corruption CASA, what happens is that you can steal money from Nigeria and buy properties in Ghana, steal money from Nigeria, buy properties in Egypt or in Johannesburg. But now when this is a continental franchise that people should fight corruption, then it means that there is no hidden place. And if you just look at what happened sometimes around 2016, there was an international anti-corruption conference in London. And if you look at the nature of that conference, it is as if the industrialized countries or our former colonial masters, it's as if we were invited for them to come and lecture us on what we should do about our country and how we should fight corruption, because we are patently corrupt. So this is an opportunity for us to tell ourselves the truth and to do an in-house cleaning with someone within our continent that will lead the fight. Now, as been said by Wala, is it enough that we have a president who symbolizes probity, transparency, and accountability? Then what becomes of the people and the image of the nation? Mm-hmm. So I think it is simply not about change begins with me. We need an ethical revolution, a revolution in which the mindset of a typical Nigerian will be changed away from celebrating corruption and a red carpet reception for people who corruptly enrich themselves. And I think also there should simply supposed not to be a Buhari as a president, but you could see other examples in the executive, in the legislature, in the judiciary, and the civil society. People must imbibe in them the culture of anti-corruption. There must be an elegy against people who are corrupt. I think this should be the national spirit.
All right. From Maiduguri, we have Ezekiel, who's calling in from Maiduguri. Hello, Ezekiel.
Good evening.
Good evening.
My contribution is I want to say that we should forget about the recognition given to our president by the African Union. We should fight the corruption back home. So we have seen the effort of Mr. President, and we really appreciate him for what he's doing. But even in the cabinet, we have seen that apart from the president himself, we do not see anybody standing as in who is ready to fight the fight the president is fighting. So I think before extending it abroad, we should tackle the corruption at home. We shouldn't shield any government official, no matter how high he might be. We should fight. We should try to eradicate, because corruption has eaten us too deep that nothing will do in our country that without passing through, without the changing handshake. So we should try. We should try and also back what the president is doing. Not really. We shouldn't be singing. We shouldn't be only celebrating him. We should celebrate Nigeria as a whole. But what we demand to see is only the president apart from the president. We see nobody again. So what are we saying? If we are only celebrating him, what about organized, but are we organized? Are we fighting? Are we corrupt free as a nation or as citizens? For the fact that what we see now is if somebody who is in party A comes to party B, he becomes a saint. So we should fight it to the extent that we, the citizens, or we, the masses, will believe that, yes, they are fighting corruption. We appreciate the effort of Mr. President, and we are really happy for the resolution given to him by the African Union. But what are we, the citizens, or those in the cabinet, doing to assist the president in fighting the corruption? Are we folding our arms to watch to what extent the president will fight the corruption? Or are we just singing it as a song, then allowing him to carry the whole lot? It will not work that way, except all of us put hands in order to fight the corruption now. Thank you.
Right. Thank you, Ezekiel. Senator, let me just stay with you for a while longer. You heard Ezekiel's opening comments. He'd rather we forgot about, leading anything on the continental level and just deal with the issues at home.
Well, it's what I have said earlier, that if you happen to be a Nigerian, you are in a country that has a continental responsibility. And you can't fight corruption only within your borders. If you said you should only fight corruption within your borders, you need to understand that a large chunk of your national resources was stolen and taken to countries in Switzerland, in Panama, in countries of the world. So what do? Do you only recover the ones that are within your borders? No. So if the corruption fight needs to be effective, you must create a buffer around your country. And that buffer is to ensure that what you stand for, also countries within your continent also stand for. Our fate as a people is tied to each other. If a Nigerian is corrupt, it rubs down to the whole of Africa. And if Africans are corrupt, it rubs down to Nigeria. If today a black man is treated badly in, say, Britain or United States, it is the whole of black people that are affected by that kind of racist outrage. So as far as I'm concerned, I believe we should take this in good light, that this appointment is in the best interest of our country as it is in the best interest of our continent. What we should understand is that once you have a continental template and somebody fully in charge in the person of President Muhammadu Buhari, then the whole world will know clearly that any attempt by, say, any company or any bank outside of this continent that attempts to defraud Nigeria or engage in act of corruption, then there will be no safe haven in Ghana, in Guinea-Bissau, or in Senegal. So it is for us to understand that it is in the interest of our own anti-corruption fight that what we stood for now and what President Muhammadu Buhari symbolizes, it's also resonated in other parts of this continent. Yes.
Well, Minister, how far has Nigeria gone in projecting itself, on the international level as a country that has achieved a lot in the anti-corruption fight? I'm bringing this up because it's quite easy for other countries who might be beneficiaries from corrupt practices from Nigeria to want to to stop this process?
Yes. Well, the first part of your question, how far have we gone in projecting this image of fighting corruption? The response to that basically is that we've gone very far. I mean, corruption is also about good governance. It's also about good governance and and democratic ideals and inclusiveness. And I think the fact that President Buhari was able to win elections from the opposition, his party winning, got people excited, outside our shores about our capacity to, do things right and to conduct fair elections. And, the fact is that, Nigeria is ranked very, very low in the transparency index, corruption index. And, and we've seen, and foreign countries have seen the strides that are being made, by this government to promote good governance in different areas. And I would say that the impact that has had beyond our shores is, when you see foreign countries a lot more willing to come to engage with us and in different areas. I'll give you an example of this. 3 years ago, in the fight against Boko Haram, a lot of countries did not want to engage with Nigeria in that fight, did not provide weaponry to Nigeria and kept away. Why? Because they believed that the support they provided, the material resources they provided, were being misused. And and then you've seen that 3 years down the line, those same countries are much more willing to engage with Nigeria, to provide funding, to provide weapons. And why is that? It's because they have seen that, this government is much more believable. They've seen that the efforts of the government in terms of, corruption and good governance are things that have inspired, confidence in those countries. So I think in terms of the impact and the effect across our borders, this government has been successful in that. And I think that there's a much more favorable, perception of Nigeria. And in this context, again, we've seen that, President Buhari has been able to put the issue of anti-corruption at the top of the international agenda. And I think this is a recognition of, of what we're doing here in Nigeria. So, for instance, in the UK, you had an international conference on corruption, which you've never had. And I think it was not a coincidence that, it was during the time of President Buhari, and it was not a coincidence that, the former Prime Minister of the UK, David Cameron, invited President Buhari and made him, a principal actor in the organization of that conference. So, in response to your question, essentially, yes, the anti-corruption fight and measures being taken in Nigeria is resonating positively in the outside world.
All right, we'll take a short break here. When we return, there'll be more on how to project the anti-corruption stance, which is getting recognition beyond the borders of Nigeria, and Nigeria piloting the fight against corruption on the African continent. So stay with us on Tuesday Live. We'll be back shortly.
Nigerians, our fearless officers and men of the Nigerian military are winning the war against Boko Haram. Today, all occupied territories have been recovered and Boko Haram has been degraded. Our affected brothers and sisters are getting their lives back. However, They are now after you and me. In our mosques, churches, schools, motor parks, markets, entertainment centers, and public gatherings. Be vigilant. Be security conscious. Report suspicious persons, objects, and movements to the police and other security agencies. The security of our nation is a duty for you and me. Nigeria, unite against terrorism.
This message is brought to you by the Federal Ministry of Information and Culture.
The struggle for independence had been a long and our founding fathers and compatriots sacrificed their comfort and even shed their blood. We cannot at this point in history afford to spirit away their sacrifices for immediate but temporary gains of today. Let us emphasize what unites and not what divides us. Working for the unity of purpose with a stronger vision for a better tomorrow. NTA, growing with the nation.
Nigeria, the only country we can train with remarkable potentials to excel. Let us believe in ourselves and change our attitude for the sake of our country and generations unborn. Let us revive our cultural values, which are our essence as a nation. Let us renew the spirit of patriotism and hope in our dear country. Do not take or give bribe. Be punctual always. No more African time. We can't expect to be global citizens and operate on African time. Join the queue. Insist that people are attended to on a first-come basis, no matter who they are or where they come from.
Nigeria, good people, great nation.
Make you report any crooked person, object or wakajube movement to police and security agent demo.
The security of our nation now work for all of us, plus including me and you.
Nigeria, make we unite against terrorism. Now, Federal Minister of Information and Culture bring on this message.
NTA Tuesday Live, a network issue-oriented innovation talk show.
Thanks for staying with us. Nigeria hopefully would be leading this fight against corruption on the continental level, but we took our cameras out and as usual we spoke to Nigerians. Let's get to see and listen to the views of citizens on how they think we're rated.
Nigeria holds a strategic position in Africa. So if the whole African country deems it necessary and very important to nominate our president, the president of Nigeria, to lead the fight against corruption, looking at it from a patriotic point of view, I think it's a very good one, and I'm highly in support and I appreciate their effort. Secondly, the fight against corruption must start somewhere.
By extension, the body language of the president denotes that our foreign policy is thrusting towards fighting against corruption. So it's a welcome development for him to have been appointed. I think African leaders have recognized his relevance, recognizing the relevance of Nigeria and making us to lead the center stage in the fight against corruption, given our population and strength. It's a good direction. It's a new dawn for Nigeria.
There's been a lot of corruption going on at all levels, not just at the leadership level. At every level, you see corruption everywhere you go. But at least we're singing a different song now since President Muhammadu Buhari came into government.
Change begins with you. It's whatever you want to change, you change. It's not about. It all begins with me and you. If I correct my home, the society will be fine.
It's a thing that has been long expected
from the international community and the world in general. President Buhari has been a dogged fighter in respect to corruption, trying to eradicate corruption from this nation of ours. I think since he's coming into office, it has been known and seen from all indications that he's a dogged fighter against corruption. And if they have recognized that fact, that means we are really moving somewhere. And from an obvious fact, the handwork and the proof of what he has been doing is showing in every part of the economy.
As a non-corrupt person, I think that nomination is a plus to him, to make him take it from Nigeria to Africa as a whole, not just Nigeria. I think he has done well in fighting corruption. He has done well. It's a plus to him.
All right, the views of Nigerians there. But again, what would be the key areas that we'd be looking at here in showing the way to stem corruption on the African continent? Because beyond what's been termed as financial corruption, you've got so many areas, like I did say earlier on, the many faces of corruption. Take, for instance, the electoral process, and it's known that many African countries have, challenges with the electoral process, and that includes Nigeria. Yes, Alaji, sir.
Okay, I think corruption, as I indicated much earlier, is multifaceted, and political corruption, in fact, is the worst form of corruption. Because when you steal people's mandate and you dispense resources the way you want to, when the people have not actually voted for you. And all this starts with the political parties that don't allow free selection at their primaries. Many political parties don't like primaries. They do what they call family matters and family understanding, and people are just imposed. And if this is not curtailed, then we cannot be on top of corruption. And recently, I was privileged to be in the panel that reviewed Kenya under the African Peer Review Mechanism. And the reason why I was specifically invited was because of the corruption elements. In the past, the review of countries were done without any particular attention to corruption as a topic. Now they have decided that corruption should become a topic, and this is going to make it easier and more important for people to realize that we can't talk of good governance without addressing the issue of corruption. And then the essence of the African Peer Review Mechanism is to be able to compare notes. All the African heads of state will sit down and see what a particular country is doing very well that they want to recommend to other countries, and what they are doing very badly that they want to learn from those other countries that are doing better than them. For instance, in Kenya, they believe that they have a lot of corruption. The government report that we reviewed, they admitted that they have a lot of corruption. But what is very impressive is the fact that they are taking steps to address that corruption. And so I think what we should do in this country is to strengthen the anti-corruption institutions. We need to give them substantial funding. If we look at the amount that is stolen, and we look at what the anti-corruption bodies are given in this country, and this is the same story all over Africa. In fact, at the seminar where we decided that President Buhari should be approached to champion the anti-corruption in Africa, the circumstances that because we looked at all the countries and we realized that everybody speaks a lot about corruption, but very little in terms of resources deployment to fight corruption is done. So we thought that a strong man like that would be able to influence other countries to strengthen and give independence to the anti-corruption bodies. Because as somebody has said here, no one person can fight corruption. Okay. It has to be something that is socially accepted and socially promoted and socially encouraged. So I think this is one of the things that he can do in the African continent to make sure that we give sufficient support to the anti-corruption institutions, because corruption is systemic and you cannot use fighting brigade to curb it.
Well, on that note, I'll take it back to Senator here. Well, Alhaji has just described the president as a strong man, but again he acknowledges the fact that no one single individual can drive this process. So what we're looking here is the institutions, the political class, the political elite, including what has come out in the electoral process. Can the Nigerian political elite today say they're in a position to provide that needed support? Because if the Nigerian president is going to lead, then it presupposes that almost 100% of the support will be garnered from within his country, the political elite, the political class. Can we say we have a political class today that is on that same page?
Well, thank you very much for this question. Well, first of all, you see, it is a myth for a nation to think because you have one Superman that is honest, that is clean, that is a saint, that is an angel, and as such he can take the nation to the promised land. What we need to understand is that nations throughout the world don't simply rely on one person. It must be the spirit of the nation that this is what we need to do and this is where we need to go. Because if you say you have one person that has everything, what if that person is not there again? What becomes of what he stands for? So I think what you should look at is that the Nigerian political elite are coming out of an era that has been characterized by that corruption, massive looting and systemic plunder of the resources of the country. And with a very exception of some governments after our independence, you have seen how government after government, there are claims of fighting corruption, but at the end of the day, what becomes of it? It has reached a certain level now for which people cannot know how clean or how dirty their government is until it is out of office. So the political elite need to understand clearly that if we are going to have a nation to which they will live as an elite, then that country must function, and it cannot function on a certain premise where a clique, because of the privileges of political power, amass the wealth to themselves and their family members and impoverish the whole country. So the political elite should understand that their survival, their existence, and even as a class, is dependent on the existence of the nation. Why most times you find a differentials between what a leader stands for and what the class he comes from stands for is the absence of ideology in that fight. There must be an anti-corruption ideology to which we should subscribe to. Subscribing it as a party, subscribing it as an institution, subscribing it as a state. This is what we need. Yes.
Right, we have another caller from Abuja here. Just go right ahead. Hello?
Good evening, gentlemen.
Yes.
The floor. Yeah, I want to first commend Mr. President for the fight against corruption in the country. Nevertheless, we still have a long way to go. If we look at the issue of the joint account between the state and local government, because the basis of establishing a local government is people. The local government should provide basic social amenities to the people, but that allocation had been hijacked by the state government, and that also hindered the development of the local government. So if the presidency or the federal government can find a way that local government will have their own allocation so that they will develop their own community. At the same time, the civil society organization should collaborate with the CVOs in the community to create more awareness that the corruption is not only in the federal level, there is corruption also in the state and the local government. Long life Nigeria and long life our state.
All right. Thank you very much, Dimeji. And that's the point at which Dr. Olaofe comes in to give us this perspective. How do you begin to galvanize this support? Because yes, you have a champion, you have a strong man, you say, who's there. What's happening to the other not so strong men? Who should be providing the strength? Who should be the fulcrum of this strong man there?
Well, if you listen to the distinguished senator and others, distinguished people here, they have spoken very well. You see, we cannot fight corruption alone. Mr. President cannot do it alone, and it has to be the work of everybody. Because once the top is nice, I believe what will follow will be okay, if they are willing to do so. In 1984, President Muhammad Buhari came with an idea, that is war against indiscipline. Then Nigeria, that corruption is not as strong as the way we see it now, usually because we are not disciplined. So he came with that idea that since there is no corruption, usually we are not disciplined. Then war against indiscipline came on board. Then we became disciplined. Now, after that one, then the issue of corruption, do it, nothing will happen, came on board. Things were going on smoothly. You pack this one, you pack this one, until, you know, it is everywhere. And it is not something that only one person can fight, as we have been saying. But we need to have one thing in mind, that if Nigeria is good today, everything in Nigeria will be okay. But if corruption has cleared everything, that you don't even know whether you can survive or not, then it will affect everybody. The nation is not moving until when we know that there are some people who have money that even when they die, 100 years, that money will not finish. The children, great-grandchildren, they'll still be, and that money belongs to everybody. And if people are, somebody must be there who will come and champion this thing for us to know that it is true that we are really fighting for this corruption. Then you look at institutions everywhere. But somebody has to come. And once we've seen President Muhammad Buhari doing that now, let others come out and let us say the same thing. Because you cannot fight it alone. Nigeria is too big. And in terms of understanding, in terms of even when you are ready to do, some people will tell you, forget, let's do it. Some people did it, nothing happens to them. But Nigeria has changed. So it has to be everywhere. Corruption in your home, corruption in the office, corruption even in the car, corruption even on the road, corruptions everywhere. So all these things is giving us name that we don't bear before. But with this introduction of let's fight corruption, now we can see that life is changing in Nigeria. Everybody begins to know that until when we join hands together to fight it. And you can even see the example of the National Assembly, institutions. Everybody is being very careful. Even when you are talking, when it's come to the issue of corruption, it's either you leave it aside or you say it next time. Even in the mosque, even in the churches, even everywhere, you can see that I learned some pastor says, if you see anybody who is corrupt in your church, blow the whistle. Even in the mosques, blow the whistle, so that all of us will fight corruption together.
Okay. David is on the line from Delta. Hello, David.
Yes, hello.
Yes, hello.
Yeah, I'm on. I'm still on. Hello?
Go right ahead, David.
Hello, hello, I can hear you. Yes, good evening, all. My name is David. I'm calling from Delta State. Okay. Yes, on the issue of corruption first, I think I must congratulate Buhari on his new appointment and his role in fighting corruption in Africa. And you see, the corruption issue is not a one-man fight. It's all of us. The corruption issue, we are all involved. One way or the other, we are all involved. So Buhari cannot fight that fight alone. We all, from the head to the grassroots, we must involve in fighting corruption. It's in our daily life. It's our way of life now. And we must do everything possible to stop it. Look at children. What is the hope of the unborn Nigerian child today? Nothing. All the systems are down. Our educational system is down because of corruption. Our local governments are down because of corruption. Many of these that are down is because of you and I. So one way or the other, we all must put our hands together to make sure we fight this fight against corruption. If we don't, we have no way forward. So first, let me congratulate our President Buhari on his fight against corruption, and I know by the grace of God we will get to a better place for us all. Thank you.
Right, thank you very much, David. And yes, we come to you. What role, what should be the place of civil society organizations, the individual citizens on their own? Because what it does seem is the responsibility is on Nigerians, the Nigerian people. There's no use in selecting your leader to drive a process when you still have 3/4 of the citizens not behind the president. Exactly. What's the role of organizations?
Okay. I think we were talking here. I feel so sad that somebody is sleeping in his house and yet he's going to wake up in the morning. He doesn't know where to go, what to do. Why? Because one person had the opportunity to pull out whatever belongs to him, and the law would not make any impact. Now, civil society organization being a watchdog in the society, we see things, we blow whistles. Sometimes they laugh at us. The politicians are here. Those in the executive are here. Sometimes they say, you people are in a hurry. Okay, in a hurry. Their generation are very much comfortable because they have realized that it is now that they are in charge. They have to take it slow and steady. Now, slow and steady, when technology is driving us mad, our kids can tell you, in fact, can perpetrate corruption from the device. Kids are robbing banks. Now, translating this into the situation on ground, in our own situation, the schools are not functioning. Why? Because certain individuals padded the budget at some point in time. They move in allocations that's supposed to go for institutions. And these are people we have. They are the role models we have today. They are the people that we are looking up to. These children, what number of students are we having as graduates? What role do you think a civil society organization can do to that kind of, this kind of audience? You want to tell them something different from what they're seeing in reality? No. Now, to move forward, these are the way forward. For example, talking about strengthening institutions. We're strengthening institutions because we want to tackle the corruption. Now, we have a scenario whereby the institution, particularly the FCC, doesn't even have, we don't have a substantive person there. Why? Because we have some ex-governors that they know very well that some of them are in courts. We sit down and talk about corruption. I don't know if really we're talking, is it because we're in media talking? We should be realistic to what we're saying. A generation of my elders here should, for God's sake, for once, relate with us, with people on the streets. In what manner? Practice what you're talking about. It's not about politics all the time. It's about reality. This country gradually is drifting into chaos. We know it very well, but we don't want to accept it. Recently, some group of young people came out to make what they said, declaration, ultimatum. On what purpose? Because the youths are left, no jobs, industries are down, because one person from the house is built in Maitama, he has to replicate that same house in his village in some number of states because he's going to visit those states. All these things are corruption.
Okay.
So civil society organizations, we've been saying this. Today there has been protests. Tomorrow there will be another protest. Yesterday there were protests. But what do they amount to?
Okay. Let's go to Anambra. We have a caller on the line, calling in from Anambra. Sembe from Anambra, go ahead. Hello?
We are saying today, the market, corruption is everywhere. And you know, Nigeria is too big for one person to fight corruption. The government of corruption will still fight corruption. It's not only moments where we fight everywhere. If you come to the market, corruption is there. School, offices, and somewhere, even the churches. So let us join our hands together to fight corruption because it's our future of our children and the future of the country. So that is all I have to say.
Okay. Thank you very much. Well, Senator, well, this responsibility is not just going to come that way. There will be implications. And again, we're looking at it. Every time there's need to take decisive action on issues in Africa, everyone remembers that there is a Nigeria, there is a Nigerian leader. And sometimes you find out that Nigeria will deploy its resources, both material and human resources, into driving these leadership positions at the detriment of its own development. Do you see this happening in this case?
Well, what we need to always put into consideration is the very fact that you don't have to have more than enough before you do good to other persons. If you said you will not give out arms or help the next person until you have more than enough, then you will never help. So as far as I'm concerned, we should understand that there are nations that have been sending in assistance to us, not because they don't have problems, but because it is part of humanity to show compassion to the next person. And when you are a regional role player, you have a duty to act beyond your own territory to bring in order, whether it is anti-corruption or anything wise. Take, for example, we have a Boko Haram insurgency in the northeast, and it gradually spread to Chad, Niger, Cameroon. You can see the interconnectivity with things like this. So when you have a war in Togo, in Benin Republic, there is the possibility of either having some armed government moving in here, or we have to contend with refugees and IDPs in our own part of the country. This is the way the global labyrinth is. So we should look at what is happening globally, and that is nations are, in most cases, before the coming of Trump, dissolving borders, and we're having common markets. So for us as a country that is located here in the West African sub-region, we have a duty and a responsibility to ourselves. Now, coming back to Mr. President, like I've said earlier, the political elite have to take it that it is in the best interest of their own survival that this country comes clean. And why I can say that the image of the president is good for the country and is also an inspiration. But the problem I have with it is that our political elite most often are not interested in that very fight. Take, for example, one major factor. The Honorable Minister here said the president took a pay cut, which is very good. That's supposed to be emulated by each and every person. But that is a difficult thing for other persons to take. But one thing again, which is even more than the pay cut, the president publicly declared his asset. And how many people who believe in change, and including the people who openly portray themselves as advocates of what he believes in and his followers, how many of them were able to toe that line? There was none apart from the vice president. So as far as I'm concerned, until it becomes a national spirit where we take it as our own fight, as a basis and the conditions for our own survival, that is simply going to be something someone is doing and we're all cheering him for doing that. And that will not in any way impact after that person is out of office.
Now, wouldn't this scenario make the president's assignment that little bit tougher for him too, if he's not getting the kind of support within his own territory?
You see, many things are a bit skewed with this country, sometimes different from other countries. You see, when people are oppressed, when people are marginalized and ostracized out of the system, in some other countries, they call for a revolution. But in Nigeria, you see a word that you don't find in any other, they said it's restructuring. And when you ask 10 people what is restructuring, you have 10 answers of what restructuring is. Now, coming back to what we said, to be able to stamp out corruption, every institution has a role to play. At the National Assembly, Parliament globally are unpopular, including the ones we are having here. So we stand on the dock now as one institution of government that is patently identified as corrupt. Now, from our own end, we also say, if we are one arm, there are also other arms. But our own is most likely to be seen, in the very sense that if you share a cast to the legislatures, it is easier for Wala to see than when my brother here has it, or when a judge has it, because it is easier for him to come here.
It's because you got my mandate. Yes, that's why my eyes are on you.
Yes, hold on, I know. Every institution have a responsibility to fight this corruption. If I may help him in terms of what the civil society can do, because that is where I come from. The civil society have a role to play in advocacy. The civil society have a role to play in questioning power. The civil society have a role to play in performing oversight function on all the institutions of governance. As for us in the parliament, we have a role to play, the key and central role to play. And if that role is not played in the parliament, it is very difficult for any other aspect of governance for it to succeed. And for it to succeed in the parliament, there must be the majority within that parliament that are committed to that very cause. If you have very few that are committed to that cause, and that's why a problem. But now, how do people go into parliament? That is another issue. People come into parliament, majority for which has to do with the loyalty to the person who helped them win primary elections. And secondly, they go into primary not because they are there to represent the interests of the people, but the interests of somebody behind who sponsored them. And if you go against that principle, now you start getting into battles with certain persons, either your party or your sponsors or people who believe that they are behind you. I come from the civil society. I've been all my life a civil rights activist, and I speak out my mind. So this country, a role it to play. There is corruption in all facets. In civil society where I come from, there is corruption.
Right.
We have, during our own time, where people write up projects and send it up for funding, and there is nobody to perform oversight function on them.
There's not even funding. In reality, there's not even funding about civil society organizations. I think we all know that.
Well, is the president's task tougher with a scenario like that? Coming from where the political class is, and of course the civil society organizations, is it tougher? Can we stick our necks out and say we have, for instance, which was a question I put to the senator earlier on, do we have a legislature or a political class that can say, yes, we're keen into this as to provide the support? And of course the political class as well. Do we?
As of now, I would say probably not. I mean, I would say definitely not.
Thank you.
You know, clearly, we still have a very long way to imbibe the culture of transparency and moral probity. And I think the distinguished senator said something that is very important. It's an ethical revolution that we need. You know, we seem to lack that moral compass. And why I use the term moral compass is that it does not always have to be about laws.
Exactly.
You know, whether there is somebody there who is going to, you know, shoot you or imprison you. We have to get to the stage where it comes from within. And part of that is, in my opinion, inclusiveness in a society where you feel that you have a stake in that society and that your behavior is for the global good.
Yeah.
Now, I'll give you an example of what I mean. You know, if you go to some countries, in Europe and others, 3 o'clock in the morning, you're driving your car, you come to a set of traffic lights, and there's nobody around. And you'll see people that will just still stop at the traffic lights. There's no question of sanctions if they don't or whatever, you know. So that their compass, their inner moral compass is, you know, dictating that. So, and I think that this keys into the point that has been made. It's not one person that's going to change it. It's not going to change overnight, but it's a process. But where Mr. President, I mean, because you were asking whether his task is easier or less easy, is that what we also need, we need role models. You know, we need, you know, we have a youth bulge in this country. So the large percentage of our population is young. And we need them to be looking up to somebody that represents something so that they can aspire to be like that person. So I think, you know, and we use the word symbol, you know, that it's a symbolic thing. A question was asked about Mr. President being this champion. But I think it's important for us to have more and more successful people, more and more high-profile people who convey this sense and quality of integrity. You know, we saw that with Nelson Mandela and others. And you know, so that in our society we can begin to have people we can point to. Because there are too many models, high-profile people in our country who do not represent that quality that we want.
Okay. Would it by any chance, this leadership role, would it by any chance lead to certain implications on resources, either human, material, for Nigeria?
Yes, it will. Well, I mean, not enormous. I mean, what we have to do is to prepare prepare a program for him. You know, it's like when you have ambassadors, brand ambassadors. You know, they go out there, they might speak at events and so forth, and you know, give messages out.
And we might at some point help to strengthen institutions in other countries. Would that be part of it, for instance?
Absolutely. There'll be a spin-off effect.